All right, folks, grab your popcorn, lock your doors, and let's dive into the kind of mystery that'll make you forget your ex's ghosting faster than you forget your gym membership. Welcome to Lord of the Mysteries chapters 61 to 70, where things are getting so wild, even Sherlock Holmes is sitting back with a drink like, damn, I didn't sign up for this. By the way, if you don't hit that subscribe button, you might just find yourself as lost as Klein's in a maze of cryptic riddles. And trust me, there ain't no sexy cultists to save you there. So tap that button before you're the only one left out of the fun. Let's get it. Chapter 71, Sluggish Phenomenon. Klein bent and extended his arm repeatedly, keeping an eye on Dunn as he pushed open the keeper's room, doing this sideways like he was tiptoeing past a sleeping tiger. Klein couldn't help but wonder if this was part of the captain's secret stealthy Nighthawk ninja training. Either way, it made him tense as hell. The kind of tension you feel when your boss says, "We need to talk," but doesn't tell you why. Pure mental torture. Grade 2 sealed artifact. Dangerous. Used with care and moderation. Even full-time Nighthawks don't know all the details. So yeah, this is definitely something not to mess around with, Klein thought, his nerves on overdrive. Suddenly, his brain hit the brakes like a computer about to crash. Everything started moving in slow motion, like someone had flipped his reality into a sloth's YouTube video at 0.25x speed. He saw Captain Dunn slow to a crawl, and in what looked like the world's slowest game of tag, he moved his hand towards Klein's shoulder. Then, boom, like hitting play again, everything snapped back to normal. Klein blinked rapidly, half expecting to find himself in the Matrix. "What the hell just happened?" he whispered, doing his best to sound calm despite his internal freakout. Dunn shook his head, looking dead serious. "Just watch." Without further ado, Captain Cool and Collected turned and stepped into the keeper's room. Klein followed, his curiosity and paranoia holding hands as he entered. Inside were 4 people. One of them was Leonard, the midnight poet, a dude who looked like he probably pens bad love poetry in his free time. The other 3 were unfamiliar, but had something in common. They were all doing the bend and extend arm dance, like they were rehearsing for a flash mob in slow motion. Klein Moretti has a miraculous connection with the Antigonus family's notebook. Dunn introduced him like some prized possession. No pressure, right? Dunn pointed at the strangers. "These fine folks are from Backlund. That's Madame Lorata, Sequence 8 gravedigger, a master sharpshooter. She's got a killer eye." Lorata, a sharp-looking woman in her 30s, gave Klein a friendly nod. Her black attire, tight trousers, and boots gave her a vibe like she'd just stepped out of a Wild West saloon, but was packing more than just a 6-shooter. Klein did his best to stay cool, greeting her with a polite nod, but he was already mentally preparing a bad pickup line about her sharpshooting. Next, Dunn pointed to a man behind the desk. "Ayer Harson. Same rank as me." Before Klein could fully process the intro, Ayer suddenly started glitching, his arm movements slowing like an old VHS tape in need of a good slap. "Was I like that earlier?" Klein wondered, realizing this slow-mo biz was courtesy of sealed artifact 2049. Damn, if we're not careful, we're gonna end up looking like a busted TikTok dance challenge. Finally, Dunn motioned to a guy who looked like he'd be perfect in an action movie. This is Borgia. With a scar running down his face and eyes sharper than a hawk's, Borgia looked like he'd chew glass for breakfast. Dude was intense, like that one friend who never laughs at jokes. "All right, let's get this show on the road," Ayer said, standing up with a confident air. Klein noticed the dude looked good even when fighting slow-mo glitches. Talk about unfair. "Where's 2049, though?" Klein's gaze wandered around the room, trying to spot the sealed artifact, but no luck. His spirit vision might help, but right now he'd stick to following Dunn's lead. Leonard was assigned driving duty, because why risk bringing Cesari, their usual driver, into the mess? Smart move. As Leonard sobered up and nodded, Klein noticed Ayer picking up a black metal chest, hidden behind the table like the sneaky thing it was. The chest had stars and a crimson full moon etched into it, and it practically screamed bad news. Klein's mind whispered, "That's the sealed artifact? What's it hiding in there? A mini demon or a bad surprise birthday cake?" Just then, the chest started thumping, loudly. Klein's heart jumped. It was like something inside was trying to escape, and not in a friendly way. Suddenly, Captain Dunn's arm movements started glitching again, courtesy of the sealed nightmare in the box. But Borgia gave him a little nudge, and all was well again. Klein thought wryly, "At this rate, we'll be the most awkward dance troupe ever. Slow motion zombie squad coming to a city near you." The group made their way out, with Klein still doing his arm exercises, like he was warming up for an aerobics class. They reached the carriage, with Leonard having already prepped everything. Klein, however, couldn't shake a question. "Won't 2049 mess with the people on the streets?" Lorata smirked and waved off his concern. "Nah, unless you're within 5 meters of it, you're good. 3 people near it should stop any civilian casualties." Phew. No unwilling participants for our awkward dance squad then, Klein thought with relief, but he kept at his stretches nonetheless. As they rode to Ray Bieber's place, the team stayed silent, staying on alert. Klein was getting used to the creepy thumping by now, but he was starting to get sick of constantly moving his arms. Finally, they arrived at their destination. As the door opened and they entered, Klein saw Ayer struggling with the now violent chest. It looked like whatever was inside was in a full-blown tantrum. The thumping grew louder, and suddenly Klein's brain short-circuited again. Time slowed, vision blurred, and his thoughts felt like wading through peanut butter. Wait, didn't they say this thing only messes with one person at a time? He wondered sluggishly. But before he could fully panic, Lorata jolted him back to reality with a well-timed push. "Didn't you say it can only affect one person at a time?" Klein managed to say, his voice shaky. Ayur, as calm as a robot, replied, "When it's angry, it affects 2 people at once. We're definitely dealing with Antigonus blood here." Klein nearly rolled his eyes. "Great. As if it wasn't bad enough dealing with one berserk artifact, now we've got double trouble." Lorata just chuckled and added, "It gets really worked up when it senses Antigonus blood. You should understand." "Nope, not at all, lady," Klein thought. "But sure, keep your cryptic comments coming." The team finally got to the real moment of truth. Eeyore opened the chest, revealing the sealed artifact, a freaky wooden puppet with a painted clown face, staring right at Klein with its soulless black eyes. As the puppet's mouth slowly opened into a twisted grin, Klein couldn't help but mutter to himself, "Well, that's not horrifying at all." To reveal a clown-like smile with the exact story you provided. As the puppet's mouth slowly opened into a twisted grin, Klein couldn't help but mutter to himself, "Well, that's not horrifying at all." Its rigid mouth slowly parted to reveal a clown-like smile. Chapter 72, Tracking. The wooden puppet's face was painted in red and yellow like some nightmarish circus clown, the kind that makes you question your life choices. Its creepy smile was jacked up to unnatural levels, like it knew something we didn't. And it wasn't good. When the puppet's lips parted to reveal that deep, abyss-like mouth, Klein felt his stomach do a backflip. A sudden wave of horror crashed through him, making every hair on his body stand at attention like they were in some kind of horror movie audition. Suddenly, everything looked washed out, like he was seeing the world through an Instagram filter no one asked for. Thick and brown, like he was about to witness the worst coffee spill in history. Klein's brain started moving slower than a hungover sloth. He wanted to scream for help, but it felt like someone had tied a noose around his neck. He couldn't even get a sound out. His one shot at yelling for help was stuck somewhere between his throat and pride. Just then, Dunn, noticing Klein's arms moving slower than a cheap wind-up toy, shoved him. The brown filter shattered, and Klein let out a loud, panic-filled "help," like a guy who just realized he left the oven on. "It's getting stronger," Klein muttered like a guy who just spotted the last slice of pizza disappearing. Being anywhere near this weird sealed artifact 2049 was like playing tag with a serial killer, except you were both playing blindfolded. Nah, forget it. This thing was impossible to protect yourself from. You could only dodge it like it was a bad Tinder match. "That's normal," Ayer Harson responded, calm as a monk on a chill pill. Lorata chuckled. "Looks like it's got a crush on you, but don't worry. It's just a relatively less dangerous Grade 2 sealed artifact," she teased in her laid-back tone. "Yeah, less dangerous, in the same way a napalm shower is just a bit warm." Meanwhile, the puppet, moving like it was both broken and possessed, got up and started waddling awkwardly to the left. It was like watching a steam engine running out of gas. And let's be real, it was so busted it could have been auditioning for the role of malfunctioning robot. Robot dance? Klein thought suddenly, flashing back to those cringy dance battles from his childhood. A new terrifying thought popped into his head. What if 22049 assimilated whatever it controlled? Was he about to become a real-life human-sized puppet? A cursed Barbie doll with all the flexibility of a brick? As Klein got lost in his worst-case scenario thoughts, Dunn woke Ayer Harson up, who then pointed to where the puppet was slowly walking towards and told Leonard, "Over there." Leonard, stuck with the less glamorous job of driving, had to detour around some buildings because, surprise, surprise, the carriage didn't come with off-road capabilities. Through all this, 2049 kept adjusting its direction like some twisted version of Google Maps. The thing was basically a puppet GPS leading them straight to the Antigonus family. Good thing it wasn't asking for toll fees. Klein, still moving his arms like he was warming up for an awkward dance competition, almost burst out laughing. He'd heard that 2049 was made by the Antigonus family. So, was this loyalty or just a spectacular screw-up? Following Ayer's directions, Leonard drove the carriage around while Ayer kept yanking the puppet back every time it got too close to the edge. It was like playing tug of war with a possessed toy, and each time the puppet's creepy mouth opened, it put two people under its freaky influence. Klein's nerves started to relax a little. Turns out, if you were fast enough to wake each other up, 2049 was just a weird puppet with bad posture and an even worse personality. So, keep the squad big, do your arm flailing, and voila, it was manageable. Soon enough, they reached the harbor and found themselves staring at a dull gray warehouse that was about as inviting as a haunted house on Halloween. Ayer stuffed the puppet back into its black chest like it was an unwanted Christmas gift. Thump! 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 Ayer kept knocking himself out and waking up, while Borgia and Larada helped him activate the chest's mystical lock. Finally, the formless seal reappeared, and Ayer exhaled like a guy who just survived the DMV. "Let's get down," Dunn said in his ever-calm tone. "Leonard, just tie the horse up here." Dressed in a mix of windbreakers, suits, and shirts, the six of them left the carriage and strolled towards the warehouse like a group of off-duty detectives. And yes, they were still doing the awkward arm stretches, making them look like the Nighthawk Awkward Dance Squad. Klein couldn't help but joke to himself, who's next on Dancing with the Stars, these guys? But jokes aside, the whole group was moving like they had a strange workout routine to stick to. Their odd movements were the best way to avoid falling under the puppet's influence. Anything else, like shaking your neck or blinking rapidly, just made you look like a weirdo in a bad thriller. As they got closer to the warehouse, Klein's anxiety kicked in harder than an unexpected hangover. What if Ray Bieber had gone full psycho with that notebook? He wasn't about to bet on another magical transmigration saving his butt. Suddenly, Dunn gestured for everyone to halt 10 meters from the warehouse's door. "Klein, do your seer thing. See if there's any danger inside," Dunn said, turning to him with his usual deep, fearless gaze. Klein nodded and did his thing, pulling out the silver chain with the topaz from his sleeve, still moving his arms like an inflatable tube guy. Entering cogitation, he muttered his usual mantra, "There's danger in the warehouse." After repeating it 7 times, the topaz pendulum spun faster than a drunk guy trying to breakdance. "Yup, big danger," Klein announced, sounding as thrilled as a guy who just won the wrong lottery. But before he could pack away the pendulum, Leonard spoke up. "Check around us too," Dunn agreed. "Yeah, the secret order might have followed us here, waiting to cause trouble." Klein took a deep breath, back into his mystical seer zone. After reciting his chant, the pendulum first spun counterclockwise, then paused and switched to clockwise. "There's danger around us," Klein said carefully, feeling his pulse quicken. Someone, or something, had tried to block his divination, but failed. Oh, great. Just as he spoke, an orange fireball the size of a fist came crashing toward them at full speed. Dunn, already armed with his revolver, shot at the ball, but it didn't even flinch. It was like trying to stop a bad idea with logic. Klein's casual thoughts about whoever was following them quickly vanished. As the fireball hurtled down, he realized The real danger wasn't the tracker or even Ray Bieber. It was that freaking puppet, 22049. If they got split up in a fight, no one would be able to snap each other out of its influence. One by one, they'd end up as creepy puppets in some twisted nightmare. Without the time to feel anguish for his clothing, he saw the Nighthawks split off into two groups while dodging. It was done very orderly. Poof! The orange-yellow fireball landed on the ground but didn't stir one bit of dust. It disappeared as though nothing had happened. An illusion? Just as this thought came to him, Klein saw Iyer Harson lift the black chest and threw at least 10 meters away. "Stay away from it! Watch it!" Iyer shouted. Before he finished his shout, Leonard and Borgia had separately approached it. They stood at least 7 meters from the chest to prevent anyone from approaching. As for Dunn and Lorata, they each held guns. They stood beside Iyer Harson, who had drawn a thin silver sword. They took up a formation resembling a crescent as they rushed towards the origins of the fireball, while taking note of the peripheral regions. Upon seeing this scene, Klein, who needed to do the arm exercises without his cane, immediately heaved a sigh of relief. He realized he had overlooked an important matter. 22049 had a limited range of influence. As long as they were at a sufficient distance from it, they did not need to worry about the danger. Klein rolled over and stood up. He stuffed his topaz pendulum into his pocket with one hand while he reached into his holster for his revolver with the other. Chapter 73, First Battle. Under the blazing afternoon sun, Klein, looking like he'd just crawled out of a desert, dust-covered and all, twisted his revolver's barrel, removing the safety he had imposed on himself. It was go time. His revolver, bronze gleaming like it was fresh out of a Wild West movie, rested in one hand, while the other was at the ready, eyes sharp like a hawk, scanning for anything suspicious. At the same time, Klein couldn't help but worry about Captain Dunn and Mr. Ayer Harson. Sure, they were nightmare beyonders who could mess with people's minds in the shadows, but in a direct fight? He wasn't so sure if they'd be throwing down as well as they spooked people. But just as Klein was pondering, Ayer Harson went all zen. Dude slowed down, looking as peaceful as a monk at meditation hour. And then, of course, he starts reciting some poetry. Because why not freak out the enemy with peaceful verses, right? When once the sun sinks in the west, and dewdrops pearl the evening's breast, almost as pale as moonbeams are, or its companionable star. Klein nearly chilled out entirely, like he was ready to lay down and take a nap right there. Thankfully, he'd seen some weird stuff like this before and wasn't in Ayer's direct line of fire. He snapped out of it real quick, entering a half-meditative state to block the poem's effects. Wow. Now he knew Dunn and Ayer could handle their own. Violent poets, he thought, shaking his head. While Ayer was still out there spitting bars, not the musical kind though, the stacked wooden crates around them rippled like water. Out popped a dude in a black tuxedo with a halved-top hat, looking like he was on his way to some swanky dinner party, if it wasn't for the clown face paint. His lips were curled up in a permanent, "I'm here to ruin your day" grin. Thud! 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 Lorata, the resident sharpshooter with fists of fury, zoomed forward, gun in one hand, fist cocked back like she was about to clock this clown. She reached him in seconds, looking like a boxer ready to deliver the KO punch. But the suited clown, clearly under the poem's influence, just swayed there, looking all peaceful. Lorata didn't care, though. She wound up and bam! Her fist was met with nothing. The clown shattered like glass, disappearing into thin air. Classic clown shenanigans. Then, in true circus style, the clown reappeared in the shadows of the crates. He grinned again, looking like he'd just pulled off the world's lamest prank. With a finger gun pointed at Lorata, he made a fake gunshot sound. Bang! Lorata rolled out of the way like she was dodging real bullets. But nope, all part of the act. Bang! 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 Dunn and Ayer weren't having any of it, though. They took aim and fired at the clown, who dodged like an acrobat, flipping, rolling, and dancing around like he was auditioning for a circus. But Lorata wasn't one to be outdone. She charged again, fists blazing. This time, though, the clown wasn't fast enough. He lifted his arm to block the punch, and bam! Right in the kisser. And then, as if things weren't already weird enough, the clown's arm ignited. That's right, homeboy just burst into flames. The fire spread toward Larada, but Ayur and Dunn, cool as ever, just shot the flames, snuffing them out before they could get too wild. The suited clown reappeared again, finger gunning and dodging bullets like he was Neo from the Matrix, only much goofier. And this time, it wasn't a drill. Real bullets started flying. Bang! Bang! Lorata finally fired her dull gold revolver, the clown barely dodging it. His hat went flying, but the guy was still alive and kicking, jumping around like a monkey on caffeine, shooting imaginary bullets from high up on the crates. Ayur, in his calm, poetic way, recited again, filling the air with more peaceful lines. Meanwhile, the suited clown scratched his ears, grinning like a maniac. Oh, great, now he's got noise-canceling poetry-proof ears, Klein thought, rolling his eyes. Suddenly, Klein noticed someone running across a nearby roof. A dude dressed in dockworker clothes with face paint like the clown. This guy was making a beeline for where Ray Bieber was hiding. Klein didn't hesitate. He aimed and fired, watching as the bullet hit its mark, making the dude stumble but keep moving. Klein fired again, missing this time. Leonard and Borgia shot too, missing their shots. Great aim, guys, Klein thought sarcastically, pausing before realizing something. Wait, why are we trying to stop him? Didn't I just divine that the warehouse was dangerous? Let this guy trigger whatever nightmare's waiting in there. And sure enough, Klein let the guy do just that. The figure crashed through the roof, disappearing into the warehouse below with a loud crash. Meanwhile, Larada's eyes turned pitch black as she performed some invisible magic, stopping the clown in his tracks like an invisible hand grabbed his ankle. Dunn, ever the badass, began reciting his own verse, not with his mouth, but with pure spirit power. The clown's life force seemed to drain away as Ayur aimed and fired. Bang! The suited clown took a belly shot, but right at that moment, a spine-chilling wail erupted from the warehouse. Klein's hair stood on end as the silence that followed sent shivers down his spine. It was the kind of silence that made your skin crawl. And then it came, a soft, rising, panting sound like something was building up, ready to explode. Thump! 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 Inside the black chest, 2049 had reached a state of frenzy. Klein could only watch and wait for the chaos that was about to unfold. Bang! 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 The suited clown shot at Dunn and Aor repeatedly while hiding away and appearing at random times. Upon seeing this, Lorata squinted and lifted the dull gold revolver in her left hand. Bang! The suited clown suddenly squatted down, avoiding the fatal shot. His half-top hat was sent flying backward, falling to the ground. The bullet had left a visible scorch mark on the hat. After rolling a few times on the floor, the suited clown scaled the stacks of wooden crates with the agility of a monkey. He shot air bullets out of his finger gun from the high ground. Ayur Harson took a few steps back and lowered his gun. He began his recital once again. Wastes its fair bloom upon the night. Who, blindfold to its fond caresses, knows not the beauty it possesses? The suited clown jumped repeatedly between the crates. He suddenly raised his hand to scratch his ears and looked at Ayur with a comical smile. Could he have stuffed his ears? The sequence potion that the secret order possesses sure is weird. Klein observed the fight from far away as he made silent guesses. Just as his thoughts flashed through him, he suddenly saw a figure appear at the top of a warehouse beside him. Furthermore, it was running straight inside where Ray Bieber was hiding. That figure was dressed in a grayish-white uniform, one which workers at the docks wore. His face also appeared to be painted red, yellow, and white. The suited clown is responsible for distracting Captain and the rest while the other person retrieved the diary? Klein instinctively raised his right hand and shot at the figure on the roof. He had just taken aim when the figure suddenly squatted, switching from running to rolling on the ground. Bang! Klein did not stop pulling the trigger. He saw the figure suddenly pause, blood blooming in a spurt. The figure looked at him in shock. While bearing the pain, he continued charging into the warehouse. That felt like a lucky shot. Klein twitched his lips and pulled the trigger once again. This time, the bullet hit the wooden roof beside the figure. Bang! 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 Leonard and Borgia also shot, but did not hit the figure. Klein wanted to criticize how terrible their shooting skills were as compared to his when he suddenly stopped pulling the trigger. That's right. Why must we stop him? Didn't I divine that there's grave danger in the warehouse just now? Wouldn't it be great if we let that guy be the vanguard and step on the landmine for us? Leonard and that Mr. Borgia must have had the same idea. With this thought, Klein lifted the barrel of his revolver and shot at the sky. Bang! 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 As the gunshots rang, the figure managed to reach the innermost region of the warehouse unobstructed. He lunged downwards, slamming into the roof as he fell down with the collapsing roof. Immediately following the commotion, the black-haired Lorada's eyes suddenly turned black. Her left hand began making a strange pulling action. The suited clown's jumping action suddenly came to a pause, as his ankle seemed to be grasped tightly by an invisible hand. Dunn did not shoot immediately, and instead pointed his revolver downward. He opened his mouth, and by simply using his spirituality to resonate the air around him, he produced a strange, faint, and ethereal voice without the use of his throat. Thus it blooms on while night is by. When day looks out with open eye, bashed at the gaze it cannot shun, it faints and withers and is gone. The suited clown suddenly became limp, as if he had lost the desire to live. Ayer Harson lifted his handgun and took aim, his finger pulling the trigger immediately. In that split second, there was an abnormal and tragic wail that came from the warehouse. Ah! The cry contained immense fear, as though he had encountered an unimaginably terrifying matter. The hair on Klein's body stood on end. The tragic cries came to a sudden stop as silence was restored in the deepest parts of the warehouse. It was a skin-crawling silence. Bang! Affected by the cry, Ayer only managed to shoot the suited clown in the belly. Ha! Ha! The silence was once again broken from the deepest depths of the warehouse. What should have been soft panting sounded. It reached a crescendo that tightened everyone's nerves. Thump! 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 Inside the black chest, 2049 had reached a frenzied state. Chapter 74, Ray Bieber. Thump! Thump! The heavy breathing and intense knocking alternated, like someone was running late for a, party. But this wasn't your average party, more like a twisted horror show. Klein and the gang were feeling the heat, nerves on high alert, as if they were waiting for a creepy clown to jump out of a cake. Surprise! Just as Ayer, Dunn, and Lorada got momentarily distracted, the suited clown made his move. He whipped out a long piece of paper from his pocket. And no, it wasn't his grocery list. The paper ignited into a fiery black whip, because why use regular tricks when you can go full circus freak? In one slick move, he lashed it toward his ankle, breaking free with a dramatic flip. A brief yelp followed, and before anyone could react, he was off like a track star who decided, nope, I'm out. His right hand clutched his boo-boo, but not for long. In seconds, the clown healed like he had magic band-aids, but his arm wasn't so lucky. It looked like it had been through one too many slapstick routines. Dunn and the crew didn't chase him because their focus was on a sound that was even more unsettling. From the innermost part of the warehouse came heavy panting, like someone was on a treadmill from hell. Bang! The door exploded because subtlety was overrated and something wrapped in a ragged cloth landed not far from Klein. When Klein took a peek, he realized it was an arm. Well, what was left of it? The rest looked like it had been through an all-you-can-eat buffet, if you catch my drift. Objects started flying out, not your usual party favors, mind you. First came a splash of red Kool-Aid-looking stuff, followed by an eye that looked like it had seen too much, and an ear that definitely didn't want to hear anymore. Then came half a heart that was beating slower than a bad drum solo, and some intestines that clearly needed more fiber. If Klein hadn't already seen some real nightmare fuel at Ray Bieber's place, he might have tossed his cookies then and there. Instead, he kept it together, but just barely. His hand hovered over his revolver. He was tempted to shoot into the darkness, but managed to keep his cool. Instead, he reloaded his gun with demon-hunting bullets, because, hey, regular bullets weren't going to cut it here. Bang! Dunn, ever the calm professional, fired into the warehouse. The bullet flew, but it was like shooting into a black hole. No response. Nothing! The panting sped up. Grayish-white, let's call it fog, spilled out from the open doorway. Ayer and Borgia fired into it, but it didn't slow down. No wounds, no nothing. This thing was a mood killer, for sure. Klein held his breath, waiting to see what would emerge. Then, there it was, a humanoid figure more than 2 meters tall, joints twisted like they'd been practicing contortionist acts in all the wrong ways. And its skin? Let's just say it looked like it'd been through one too many spa treatments gone wrong. This thing wasn't winning any beauty contests anytime soon. Its head looked relatively normal until you saw the loose false tooth, bloody drool, and bits of, well, whatever it had for dinner. Klein couldn't help but wonder, was Ray Bieber still even fucking human? His heart raced like a horror movie's climactic moment. Bang! Leonard fired off a demon-hunting bullet right into Ray Bieber's forehead. The result? A hole, sure, but instead of, the usual, if out came a stream of, let's call it gray goo that wiggled and turned into squishy, writhing bugs. Fun, but Monster Bieber wasn't bothered. In fact, he seemed almost insulted. Slow and steady, he made his way toward Borgia, but the real prize was the black chest that contained sealed artifact 2049. Loss of control of Beyonder powers, Dunn growled. Lorata, find its weak spot. Looks like we're dealing with a dead man walking. On it. Lorata's eyes shifted into a weird spirit world gaze, searching for that sweet spot. Meanwhile, Klein activated his spirit vision to give her a hand, but all he saw was a mass of grayish-white craziness. Yep, that was helpful. Ayer and Leonard took a different approach. They began to chant in eerie harmony. Oh, the threat of horror, the hope of crimson cries. One thing at least is certain, that this life flies. One thing is certain, and the rest is lies. The flower that once has bloomed forever dies. A calming, sleep-inducing energy filled the air. The monster started to slow, almost like it was vibing with the poetry, until it let out a high-pitched shriek that nearly blew everyone's eardrums out. Klein felt his head throb, and some kind of warm liquid dripped from his nose. He wiped it away, noticing Ayer and Leonard had collapsed too, their faces streaked with what looked like tomato sauce? Sure, let's go with that. The rest of the team wasn't looking much better. Borgia, Dunn, and Lorata staggered back, pale and weakened. Monster Bieber swung his twisted limb at Borgia, and despite their best efforts, bullets didn't seem to faze him. This was the worst party ever. In a desperate move, Ayer aimed for the black chest and shot, knocking it out of Monster Bieber's reach. It tumbled a good distance away, and the strange thumping inside grew louder, like someone was really trying to make their presence known. I found it, Lorata shouted. I need you to hold it off for at least 3 seconds. Got it. Dunn didn't hesitate. He tapped his glabella, sending out invisible waves of power that made Monster Bieber pause, eyelids drooping. Lorata seized her chance, dashing under the creature like a ninja. With a swift, powerful blow, she hit its most vulnerable spot, right in the weak point, you know what I mean, making the monster groan like it had just lost a game of dodgeball. Monster Bieber let out a scream, its body starting to light up like a neon sign before. Well, let's just say things got messy. Boom! The explosion sent Klein flying. When he landed, all he saw was a pile of goo where Monster Bieber used to be. His teammates were scattered across the room, groaning and struggling to get up. Just when Klein thought it was over, he spotted the black chest nearby. Its cracked surface facing up, a skinny brown arm extending from it. Sealed artifact 2049? Oh, hell no. Klein's heart pounded as he tried to scramble away, thoughts sluggish as the artifact's power began to take hold. His thoughts turned sluggish, with the content in between. As the artifact's power began to take hold, Klein's head suddenly buzzed. His body reacted, but his mind felt like it was moving through thick syrup. The black chest had rolled closer to him during the explosion, and the crack in its surface revealed a skinny brown arm extending out. Sealed artifact 2049. Klein realized, panic rising in his chest. He had to get away, but it was already too late. His thoughts turned sluggish. The content is unchanged, except for ensuring it flows naturally with the previous part. Chapter 75. Saving himself. Oh no, I've been controlled by the puppet. Klein thought, feeling like he'd been trapped in the world's worst video game glitch. The captain and the squad are either knocked out or barely hanging on. They can't even get up. No way they'll wake me up in time. No, I have to. Save myself. He tried to hype himself up, even though his body felt like it was covered in invisible peanut butter. Everything around Klein slowed down to a crawl, and his brain felt like it was swimming in a thick, gluey mess. Even thinking was becoming a struggle. He wasn't about to turn into a life-sized action figure, so he fought against the puppet's control, desperate to find a way out. I definitely can't just smack myself. There's got to be some external force. He thought through the haze, and boy, it wasn't easy when it felt like his brain had been stuffed with expired mashed potatoes. No time for a deep brainstorm. Klein forced his rusty knee to move and took a step, awkwardly turning counterclockwise. Meanwhile, that invisible noose around his neck tightened, but he didn't resist it. Instead, he recited in his mind, "Blessings stem from the immortal Lord of heaven and earth." Creak, creak, creak. His knees were screaming in protest as he took another slow, distorted step. Blessings stem from the Sky Lord of heaven and earth. His thoughts were getting even more sluggish. At this point, it was like his brain had been crammed with all the useless apps he never deleted. His movements were jerky, like someone hit his life with a lag spike. Blessings stem from the exalted Thearch. Klein's mind was almost completely shut down, working on autopilot. But he took that final step. Almost fully under control now, Klein knew he was done for. Even if Ayer Harson could snap out of it, it wouldn't be in time. But because Klein wasn't about to go down without a fight, he managed to mumble the last line of the chant. Blessings stem from the celestial worthy. Just as he finished, the chaos took over. Klein's thoughts were shattered by hysterical shouts and murmurs, as if someone had just blasted dubstep inside his head. His brain turned into a boiling pot of chaos soup, but suddenly, everything lightened. His body became as stiff as a board, while his soul felt like it was floating. Endless grayish-white fog and red stars of different sizes appeared before him again. Vast, mysterious, creepy in a Halloween special kind of way. Klein's scrambled brain settled, and slowly he regained control over his thoughts. Before him, a magnificent palace loomed. Phew, thankfully it worked, he muttered, his heart still hammering like he'd barely dodged an anvil falling on his head. From his previous investigations, he knew that getting controlled by sealed artifact 2-049 was basically a one-way ticket to the afterlife. But hey, thank goodness for his luck rituals and the funky gray fog world. Things weren't exactly normal, but normal was overrated anyway. After pacing a bit, Klein finally sat down and sighed. I can't just stay here forever, can I? I mean, what do I even tell the others when they wake up? Oh, hey, no big deal, I'm just in zombie mode. Yeah, that'll go over real well. His body was still back in the real world, more zombified than a walker from a low-budget horror flick. But if he returned now, who's to say he wouldn't just get yanked back under sealed artifact 2049's control? Suddenly, Klein facepalmed. Damn, I really haven't gotten used to being a seer, have I? He chuckled to himself. With a blink, he was suddenly sitting at the long bronze table, like some boss in a high-backed chair. A fountain pen appeared in his hand like magic. He scribbled a sentence on a piece of illusionary paper. Returning to the real world is very safe. Next, Klein summoned a spirit pendulum from thin air. It was just a projection, but hey, it worked. Holding the silver chain with his left hand, he let the topaz dangle near the paper. Taking a deep breath, Klein half closed his eyes and repeated the sentence. Returning to the real world is very safe. After repeating it 7 times, the pendulum began to move. Clockwise. Affirmation. Phew. Klein felt relief wash over him. His mind back in place, Klein let go of the silver chain and dove back into his body like a skydiver without a parachute. As the fog faded away, Klein returned to find his physical body still standing dazed, the brown puppet halfway out of the chest, and the sealed artifact frozen in time. Right as he tried to flex his arm, a voice drifted into his ears like a creepy whisper carried by the wind. Do you wish to be awakened? You can be saved as long as you do me one favor. Klein's senses went on high alert, but he stayed still. Just get me the Antigonus family notebook. Nod if you agree, and I'll save you. What in the creepy puppet hell is this? The voice kept going. And hey, if you do this for me, I'll sweeten the deal. You're a seer, right? Our secret order can give you sequence 8. Yeah, I know the church doesn't have it, but we do. Just so you know, seer evolves into clown. Clown? Oh, great, Klein thought. First, I'm a puppet. Now I'm about to be the leader of the circus. The voice urged again. Come on, make your choice. Time's running out. Klein thought fast. This was the dude that fled earlier. He's trying to use me as bait. Ain't no way I'm falling for that. But outwardly, he nodded. Yeah, let him think I'm on board. With his decision made, Klein saw a figure materialize. It was the sweeted clown from before, standing just a few meters away. The clown pulled out a long paper slip that snapped straight like a wooden pole and jabbed it toward Klein to test him. Oh, you want to play? Klein thought, already planning his next move. Right before the pole touched him, Klein snatched it and yanked hard. The clown stumbled, and Klein didn't hesitate. He aimed his revolver. Bang! Bang! But he wasn't aiming at the clown. He shot past him, straight towards sealed artifact 2049. The clown instinctively rolled away, backing off fast, but Klein knew exactly where he was forcing him to go. The kill zone. In no time, the clown's movements slowed. Got him. Klein took aim at the sluggish target and squeezed the trigger one last time. Bang! The end was near for the clown, and Klein smiled to himself. He had already escaped the control of sealed artifact 2049. Now it was time to deal with the clown. Just after he nodded, a transparent curtain stirred 2 to 3 meters to his side. It revealed the suited clown, who had his face painted with a clown's pastel colors. It was none other than the Secret Order member who had fled previously. At that moment, as Klein had previously turned around in an attempt to leap out of 2049's effective range, his back was facing the black chest and the puppet. The suited clown was in front of him to his side. First, it was to stay away from the sealed artifact, and second, to avoid his revolver's barrel. It was clear that he was very careful. The suited clown pulled out a long paper slip from his pocket and shook it vigorously until it turned straight like a wooden pole. He held the wooden pole, and at a distance of 2 to 3 meters, he gave Klein's shoulder a prod in an attempt to wake him. This fellow knows 2049 very well. He knows that if the scent of an Antigonus family descendant is present, the puppet would go ballistic and control 2 at a time. He also knows that throwing a rock doesn't seem effective. At the very least, I've seen Captain and Company attempt similar means. Although Klein did not know why 2049 had stopped assimilating him again, he did not dare stay within 5 meters of it any longer. Therefore, he waited as he held his breath. Just as the wooden pole was about to touch his shoulder, Klein suddenly raised his left hand and grabbed the edge of the pole and yanked it backward. The suited clown was caught by surprise as his body was pulled forward. He staggered a few steps forward as the gap between him and Klein contracted once again. He was now less than 2 meters away. At the same time, the prepared Klein squeezed his right finger on the revolver's trigger. Bang! Bang! He shot twice but did not aim at the suited clown. Instead, he had aimed behind him, shooting to the side of sealed artifact 2049. Before the gunshot rang, the suited clown had taken the initiative to roll from his staggering state. He had instinctively backed off. Klein released his hand, which had grabbed the wooden pole, as he took several steps away rapidly and rushed out of the danger zone. Just as the suited clown rolled twice and was about to jump backward, his head went abuzz as his thoughts rapidly turned sluggish. No good. He forced me to dodge in the direction of the Antigonus puppet. I'm within 5 meters. How could he not be controlled by the Antigonus puppet? The suited clown stopped from his rolling as he attempted to crawl out with his seemingly rusty joints. At that moment, Klein had already turned around. He held his revolver with both hands as he aimed at the slowly moving target. To him, that was equivalent to shooting a fixed target. Having seen the suited clown's battle with Dunn, Ayor, and Lorata, Klein knew that he was agile and good at rolling. Therefore, even when they were just a meter or two apart, he had carefully given up on shooting directly. Instead, he forced the clown to dodge to the kill zone he imagined, where sealed artifact 2049 was. If the puppet had been ineffective, the suited clown would have determined that he had fallen into a trap. He would then escape by leaping backward and not pose any significant threat. Bang! Reflected into the indescribable eyes of the suited clown, the black-suited Klein pulled the trigger calmly. Chapter 76, Dealing with the Aftermath. Bang! The silver bullet zipped through the air, striking the suited clown in the neck. A crimson mist erupted from the wound, painting his skin and bow tie a shocking shade of red. The suited clown gasped, struggling to breathe, his arm frozen as if weighed down by lead. His movements were awkward, sluggish, like a puppet with tangled strings. Bang! Klein, now in a focused state, wasn't fazed by the vibrant mist. He pulled the trigger again with calm precision, a grim satisfaction in his practiced aim. A gaping hole appeared in the clown's forehead, the decorative fountain spraying everywhere, as his eyes dulled, realizing too late the power of Klein's weapon. As the clown crumpled to the ground, Klein turned away, spinning his revolver and letting the empty shell casings fall like confetti at a poorly planned party. Dressed in his black suit and half-top hat, he approached Ayur Harsin, pulling out his last silver bullet and loading it into the chamber. He didn't look back at the clown's body. It was his first kill, and he felt a strange discomfort. It had been necessary, though. He couldn't risk the clown being controlled by the puppet's master. Klein wasn't in a hurry to check the clown's belongings, especially not for the clown potion formula or clues. He could wait until later to search with Dunn, Ayer, and the rest. If the Nighthawks had it, he would eventually gain access, provided he contributed enough. Being a seer was still new for him, and it would take time to fully understand his abilities. Lost in thought, Klein quickly reached Ayer, who struggled to sit up, his clothes covered in dust and debris. "Mr. Harsin, what can I do to help?" Klein asked, squatting beside him and keeping the revolver pointed safely at the ground. Ayer took a deep breath, visibly shaken. The creature was too strong. If it weren't for its weakness? He gestured to a small blue bottle nearby, chuckling despite the situation. "I was trying to take some medicine, but my hands were too shaky to play doctor." The sky blue bottle was about the size of Klein's finger, and the cap lay on the ground, revealing a few drops of liquid inside. Klein picked it up, glancing at it skeptically. "Mr. Harsin, there are only a few drops left." "Go to Borgia. Check his pockets," Ayer instructed, gasping for breath. "All right," Klein replied, turning to ask, "Is this restorative medicine?" "Not exactly. It helps stimulate our minds and tap into our potential for a short time until we can get proper treatment. It's called the Goddess's Gaze. Make sure Borgia drinks half the bottle." Klein nodded and hurried to Borgia, who groaned in pain. He located the sky blue bottle in the Nighthawk's pocket, uncapping it carefully. He held it to Borgia's lips, who struggled to open his mouth, but Klein gently poured the dark red liquid in. After a few moments, Borgia's spirit revived, and he whispered, "Thank you." With renewed energy, he sat up slowly, tending to his wounds before checking on the unconscious Larada and Dunn. He retrieved the Goddess's Gaze from Dunn's pocket. Klein returned to Ayer, giving him the remaining half bottle. After a few panted breaths, Ayer sprang up, looking almost as if he hadn't been injured at all. "I'll help Borgia. You check on your partner." Klein had no objections and jogged over to Leonard Mitchell, the poet. "I can handle it myself," Leonard said, smiling as he raised the blue bottle. Surprised, Klein watched as Leonard pushed himself up with one hand. It seemed his injuries were not as severe as he had thought. Leonard had been able to take the medicine from the start. That also meant he had witnessed the luck enhancement ritual I performed. Klein narrowed his eyes, a mix of relief and concern filling him. Leonard's presence revealed more secrets than he had anticipated. Just then, Leonard strolled over, a playful grin on his face. "I actually wanted to save you, but it looks like you've got this handled." "Don't worry about it. Some people are just special in ways others can't understand, like you and me," he added with a confident smile as he walked toward Dunn and Larada. Klein thought, narcissist? But he felt oddly relaxed. Leonard Mitchell was a character, hiding more than he let on. Meanwhile, Captain Dunn picked up a blood-stained notebook, the cover black and thick, exuding an aura of ancient mystery. Klein couldn't see the pages from his angle, but he suspected the notebook held secrets he would never fully understand. Dunn closed the notebook and addressed Ayer and the others. "Let's secure this notebook and sealed artifact 2049 behind Tinjin's Chanis Gate. We'll wait until everyone's recovered or until we get assistance from Backlund." Klein felt a mix of disappointment and relief. He longed to explore the Antigonus family's secrets, but understood the risks involved. Handing it to the church for safekeeping was the wisest choice. Agreed. Ayur, Borgia, and Larada replied, turning to check on sealed artifact 2049. They supported each other, ensuring the puppet was safely stored away. Everything seems to be back to normal, Ayur said, visibly relieved. Inside the dimly lit chest, the puppet stirred, its painted face eerily illuminated by the light. Dunn, Leonard, and Klein began to search the sweeted clown's remains, discovering an assortment of strange items, but nothing that seemed valuable or enlightening. Klein sighed inwardly as he found a wallet containing some cash. He quickly checked his own attire, realizing his formal suit was torn and dirty from the tussle. Dunn caught his eye, smirking slightly. Losses during a mission can be reimbursed. Reimbursed? That term filled Klein with hope. With proper care, his suit could be restored and reused, and maybe even a second one could be bought for future missions. Let Fry handle the body. He might uncover what the man originally looked like or find relevant clues, Dunn said, poking the clown's painted face with gloved hands. As they searched deeper into the warehouse, they discovered remnants of what had once been a sign of Ray Bieber's bizarre ritual. Ray Bieber was likely drawing power from the notebook through an ancient ritual, much like consuming a high-level potion. These rituals are perilous and require a tranquil environment, often demanding a deep, undisturbed slumber. It explains why he hadn't left Tingen yet, Dunn speculated, examining the area. Larada chuckled darkly. It's a shame we interrupted him. The anger of a disturbed spirit is quite memorable. It's a form of losing control, Dunn explained, directing his gaze toward Klein. Why wouldn't he just leave Tingen for a more suitable place? Klein wondered aloud. Ayur interjected with a knowing look. Those influenced by ancient powers often lack common sense. Dunn took a breath and said, hiding his own injuries, Leonard, you're in good shape. Stay here and keep watch for any bystanders. The rest of us will search for items among Ray Bieber's remains. Chapter 77, Remnant Items. All right, answered Leonard with a relaxed expression when he heard Dunn's suggestion. Following that, everyone walked out of the warehouse and came close to where Monster Bieber had self-destructed. With him at the origin, they began searching outwards radially. Captain, what are we looking for? Klein asked, trying to suppress his gag reflex as he looked at the rotting flesh and blood strewn everywhere. Are we sure this isn't just the aftermath of a really bad barbecue? Dunn didn't look up. Instead, he used his deep gray eyes to sweep the ground. Awakening ahead of time, losing control, and becoming a monster. This means that Ray Bieber did not fully absorb the Beyonder powers provided by the notebook. It also means that a part of his body is considered extraordinary, making it prime material. If you ever encounter something similar, make sure not to miss out on doing a search. It might be a relatively important item. And by important, I mean something that could potentially ruin your dinner plans. So that's the case. Klein nodded slightly in enlightenment. In the blink of an eye, he thought of another matter. If the part where Monster Bieber had concentrated the Beyonder powers were some indescribable part, wouldn't that be awkward? Wouldn't it be extremely disgusting to concoct it into a potion, like mixing a smoothie with toenails or something? Just as Klein's mind wandered, Borgia with his sharp, eagle-like eyes suddenly shouted, Found it! Ahem! Dunn and company immediately turned and closed in. Driven by his curiosity, Klein walked over to Borgia with a quickened pace. Soon, he saw the item before Borgia. It was a grayish-white object about the size of a fist. Its surface was filled with gullies, and it looked soft but ductile. It looked like a brain that had been extracted from a living being. Great, we found the last piece of Monster Bieber's failed life choices. Although Klein was unable to make out the extraordinariness of the blob of grayish-white, he was certain that Borgia had not made a mistake since it had remained intact despite the violent explosion it had undergone. Dunn carefully observed it and squatted down. As he extended and bent his right arm, he used his black-gloved left hand to carefully grab the grayish-white item. The moment it was touched, the blob of grayish-white immediately spread out into an extremely sticky liquid. Oh, great! Now we've got a science project gone wrong. At that moment, Ayur Harson took out a tin-colored square case, removed the cigarettes from them, and placed them into his pocket. Then he handed the square case to Dunn and smiled. I know, you only like pipes. Dunn chuckled and took the square case. Then he poured the grayish-white sticky liquid into the case for temporary storage. After storing it away, everyone did a cursory sweep of the area. After confirming that they had not missed anything, they left. When they came out, they saw the horses digging their hooves into the ground, clearly spooked and nervous. They had nearly escaped their reins. They must have seen the leftovers from Monster Bieber's last meal. I'll drive. Borgia covered his mouth with his hand and coughed softly. I know you are good at placating animals, said Ayer with a smiling nod. And here I thought you were just good at being a drama queen. After boarding the carriage, Dunn, Lorata, Ayer Harson, and Klein, who continued their arm exercises, temporarily had nothing to say as they fell into silence. When the trotting of the horses sounded while the carriage wheeled off, Dunn looked at Klein and deliberated over his words before saying, I know you are filled with curiosity about the Antigonus family's notebook. You wish to understand what happened. No, not at all. Klein subconsciously denied. It was an ancient relic filled with misfortune. Without giving him time to answer, Dunn continued and said, However, I have to first report this to the Holy Cathedral. Only after they determine the confidentiality level of the notebook can we consider if this can be shown to you. No problem. Klein gave a short and simple reply, still wondering if he'd just walked into a supernatural episode of a crime show. Dunn continued his arm exercises as he thought before saying, I once promised that you can be made a formal member of the Nighthawks when we confirm that Ray Bieber is a descendant of the Antigonus family clan. Now, not only have we determined Ray Bieber's identity, we have even eliminated the monster and spoiled the Secret Order's conspiracy. In this entire process, your performance was outstanding. You personally killed a member of an evil organization. Therefore, I will fulfill my promise and immediately make an application to the Holy Cathedral. We'll wait for their approval. Right, I forgot something important. I still need to ask if you're agreeable to it. Mr. Klein Moretti, are you willing to formally join the Tinjin Nighthawks as one of its members? Your salary will increase several-fold, reaching £6 a week. Furthermore, you will get a raise every subsequent year. Your salary will be paid by the church and Awa County's police department equally. You will also gain the identity of a probationary inspector. It will be very useful at times. As a support-type Beyonder, you do not always need to face enemies, but you will have to guard Chanis Gate once a week. Without the squad's permission, you are not to leave Tingen without permission. Furthermore, you have to keep this a secret from your family. You know, just in case they want to throw you a surprise party for being so mysterious. By the time Dunn finished listing the restrictions and benefits, Klein was already thinking deeply for more than 10 seconds. I wish to become a formal Nighthawk. Only by doing so could he continue to gain more access to mystery, such as the situation regarding the Secret Order. After reading the gathered Roselle diaries, Klein had some changes in thoughts about himself. Being skilled in mysticism knowledge to seek a way home was an immutable goal of his. Raising his strength further to more safely make the mysterious space above the gray fog do his bidding, before using it to return home, was a new addition to his goals. Just as Emperor Roselle said, simply relying on external powers was very dangerous. Furthermore, after becoming a seer and obtaining Beyonder powers, Klein sensed that he had a better grasp of the mysterious space. For example, he could pull another person into the gathering. This forced him to consider what possibly beneficial changes would happen to the mysterious space above the gray fog when he reached Sequence 8, Sequence 7, or an even higher sequence. Of course, Klein knew very well that this was built on the premise that he completely resolved the side effects of the seer potion. He could not rush or be rash. Very well. Once the Holy Cathedral approves of it, you will become one of us. Dunn's gray eyes were tinted with a hint of joy. At that moment, Ayer Harson, who was listening in, interrupted. Klein, don't mind me calling you Klein. Your performance today was really excellent. You managed to kill a Beyonder from the Secret Order. I even suspect that he has reached Sequence 7. How did you do it? I really find it incredulous. The question has finally been raised. Having long prepared for it, Klein acted as though he was organizing his thoughts. He knew that it was indeed incredible and enigmatic that he had killed a beyonder that ran rings around Dunn, Ayer, and Larada. Ayer and company were not blind or dumb, so it was a matter of time before they inquired about the process. However, he never expected them to wait till this moment. That's right. Captain and Mr. Harson were previously injured, and their situations could have worsened at any time. At that moment, any matter that could result in conflict had to be put on hold. It was to prevent him from acting desperately because of his exposed secret. Only after he expressed his attitude and showed that he was willing to be a Nighthawk were they at ease enough to ask. How crafty. They did not have any obvious communication between themselves, but they had made the same tacit decision. Klein answered as though in thought. It's an extremely lucky event. The clown in the tuxedo made a fatal misjudgment. Back then, sealed artifact 2049 was thrown near me as a result of the explosion's blast. It looked about 5 to 6 meters from me, but it was only a crude observation. It was very easy to come to the conclusion that I was within the sealed artifacts. He even described the theories he had back then, including how he believed that the sweeted clown had divined that taking the notebook would be an extremely risky endeavor. Thus, he had changed his plans. Of course, all the truths were used to conceal the lie made in the beginning, that he had been controlled by sealed artifact 2049. Divined that it was extremely risky to retrieve the notebook? Yes, it's indeed highly risky. However, the risk was actually because of you, said Larada with a chuckle as she covered her mouth. His divination was right, but it caused him to end up in a fatal situation. This sure is an interesting account. Klein was taken aback before he nodded seriously. Indeed, divination is never crystal clear, and that vagueness only means that an interpretation can be wrong. Yes, I have to take note of that. How did you finish him off after that? Asked Dunn while he did his arm exercises and leaned back. Klein smiled. I pretended to agree to him and made him awaken me. However, he did not dare enter the effective range of the sealed artifact. He stayed 2 to 3 meters away and used a strange paperslip in an attempt to push me. I seized the opportunity and pulled at his paperslip, causing him to be thrown into 2049's effective range. I then complemented it with repeated shots and completed my goal. Heh, it's quite an embarrassing matter for me. I didn't even have the confidence of hitting him despite being only 2 to 3 meters away from him. Ayer nodded slightly. With his evasive abilities, a distance of 2 to 3 meters is not an absolute guarantee. You might be able to strike him, but fail to hit him in a vital spot. That would only make things worse. Your choice back then was impeccable. It can even be said to be outstanding. If I were in your shoes, I might not have been able to do it better than you. He did not ask further. After all, the suited clown's entry into the sealed artifact 2049's area of influence basically sealed his fate. He became a living target. The subsequent sequence of Seer is clown. How odd. Dunn suddenly said with a sigh. Chapter 78. Trauma. Ayer Harson added, exactly, it is hard to imagine that the subsequent sequence of Seer would be clown. According to normal logic, no one would link them together. Is that strange? I remember that quite a number of sequence potions also seem to lack similarities between their different levels. Larada covered her mouth as she yawned. It was obvious that her injuries were more severe. Not even Goddess's gaze could help her maintain her vibrant energy. No, Larada, this is completely different. Even if the other sequence potions lack a connection, we can find common points if viewed from a different angle. However, I cannot comprehend it for Seer and Clown at all, said Ayer Harson as he shook his head and sighed. Klein listened to their discussion and laughed. No, there's still a common point. What? Ayer asked curiously, even Dunn's arm exercises clearly slowing down. Klein replied without hesitation, be it a Seer or a Clown, both of them can be found at the circus. Ayer, Dunn, and Larada were stunned. Quite a good answer. I like young men like you. Larada was the first to return to her senses as she burst out laughing. Ayer also smiled as he shook his head. In this era, the number of gentlemen who are equipped with the spirit of self-deprecation is decreasing. Thankfully, we have met one today. Do you think I like to engage in self-deprecation? It's not like I figured out any commonality between the two. Klein complained internally as he replied with a wry smile. I only wish that the potions of the sequence pathway wouldn't have names like beast tamer, acrobat, or magician. That would really form a circus. Furthermore, it's a one-man circus. Ha ha! Dunn and company were immediately amused. It filled the carriage with a joyous atmosphere. The carriage proceeded straight for Zoutland Street. Klein, who was not injured, was the first to enter the Blackthorn Security Company. Goddess, what happened to you? Why are you like that? Roseanne exclaimed when she caught sight of him. Klein looked down at his dirty and tattered suit. He replied with his heart aching, There are always all kinds of accidents during a mission. Thankfully, the goddess blessed us, and it ended beautifully. Praise the lady. Roseanne devoutly drew the crimson moon across her chest. Before waiting for Klein to continue, she asked, Do you need us to hide on the third floor again? Is the sealed artifact really that dangerous? Trust me, it's far more dangerous than you can imagine, replied Klein with a lingering fear. If not for his even more mysterious luck enhancement ritual, he would have perished at the hands of 2049. Goddess. Roseanne's lips quivered as though she had still a million things to say or questions to ask. But considering how the captain was waiting downstairs, she held back her compulsion. She informed Mrs. Oriana and company to head upstairs to the third floor. The neighbors of Blackthorn Security Company were either estates of the church or devout clergymen who vaguely knew of the situation. When all the civilian staff dispersed, Klein did not rush to the entertainment room to inform the other Nighthawks. He immediately returned and helped the captain and the rest escort sealed artifact 2.049, Monster Bieber's remnants, and the Antigonus family's notebook to the second floor. Through the partition, Dunn pushed open the entertainment room's door and said to the two Nighthawks who were playing Gwent cards, Fry, Royale, both of you are to immediately head to the harbor's Tyrell warehouse and aid Leonard in dealing with the aftermath. All right. Royale, with her raven black hair and cold expression, was the first to stand up. Corpse Collector Fry, with his black hair, blue eyes, and pale skin, stood up next. They put down their Gwent cards and walked out of the entertainment room, and when they passed through the partition, they clearly paused. Wait, Dunn shouted, not letting down their expectations. What else is there? Sleepless Royale turned her head back and asked without an expression. Remember to inform the police. Let them seal off the road. Prevent anyone from coming close until you are done with the scene and move the corpse back, Dunn said, smacking his forehead. All right. Royale turned around and took 2 steps before pausing once again. She turned her head, blinked, and confirmed coldly, Captain, is there nothing else? No, Dunn answered categorically. Royale nodded unnoticeably and walked towards the entrance. As for Corpse Collector Fry, who exuded coldness and darkness, he maintained his adequate pace. At that moment, Dunn added, Remember to tell Roseanne, Mrs. Oriana, and company that they can come down. No problem. Fry calmly replied as though no emotion stirred in him. Klein watched as the two Nighthawks walked out the door and went upstairs before heaving a secret sigh of relief. He followed the captain and the rest underground. They proceeded straight to Chanis Gate. As Dunn gestured for Sleepless Kenley to open Chanis Gate, he instructed Klein, Go to the armory and get old Neil here. We need his ritualistic magic to heal ourselves. As the effects of the medicine began to wear off, his mental state gradually waned. All right. Klein did not wait for the captain to continue. He added, I will watch the armory in old Neil's place. I will also request at least 20 demon hunting bullets and also wait for the Holy Cathedral's approval, curbing my curiosity about the Antigonus family's notebook. Dunn was instantly at a loss for words. Captain, is there anything else? Asked Klein with a smile after beating Dunn to it. Dunn shook his head and remained speechless. He pulled out his cane and turned around. After walking a certain distance, Klein turned into the armory and recounted the happenings generally to old Neil, who was drinking plain water. He became a monster that lost control. You even killed a Beyonder? Old Neil quickly tidied up his desk. It's like I'm listening to the script of a play. He mumbled as he circled around the desk and walked straight toward the corridor without waiting for Klein's answer. Klein asked out of curiosity, Mr. Neil, doesn't the church have real restorative medicine? Why would ritualistic magic be needed? No medicine made with ordinary ingredients can provide the permanent restorative effects of a ritual. Extraordinary ingredients are very rare, and most of them are not suitable for restorative medicine. Old Neil explained casually. You should know about goddesses' gaze, right? When the medicine is first made via a ritual, it would be a standard, real restorative medicine. But every minute after its completion, its effect evaporates until little of its efficacy is left. I see. Klein nodded disappointedly. As a former keyboard warrior and avid gamer, it was a habit to yearn for a medicine with magical healing properties. He watched old Neil leave and sat down, taking in the tranquility that he had not had in a very long time. In the midst of his piece, he recalled the tragic death of the sweeted clown. He recalled himself shooting coldly, the gruesome wound, and the spewing of fresh blood. Klein's body shivered as he felt discomfort. He first stood up, then sat down, then slowly repeated the process. He also did some pacing back and forth in between. Phew. He let out a breath and decided to occupy himself with something so that he could stop thinking of those negative images. Klein took off his silk hat and formal suit. He then took out a handkerchief and a brush to clean off the dirt and mud. After an uncertain amount of time, he heard old Neil's familiar footsteps. Old Neil's gait involved him walking on his heels, and it made a distinctive noise as he ambled down the hall. How tiring! Old Neil complained as he walked into the room. Tell the rest that no one is to come here within the next hour. I need to rest, he instructed casually, glancing towards Klein. Why don't you rest upstairs, and I'll keep watch here? Klein suggested out of kindness. Old Neil shook his head. It's too noisy upstairs. Roseanne is a lady who just can't stop talking. All right. Klein did not insist. He put on his coat and hat, picked up his cane, and returned to the corridor. Then he pulled the armory's door ajar. Tap, tap, tap. He slowly walked on the empty path when he suddenly saw many rooms he had never seen previously by the side. There is a secret door here. Klein stopped at a spot around a bend as he looked at the room. He discovered that corpse collector Fry had already returned. He was carefully examining a completely dissected corpse. Corpse? Klein's heart stirred as he mustered his courage and approached the room. He knocked lightly on the open door. Knock! 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 Fry stopped his actions and turned around, looking over with his blue but ice-cold eyes. Fry was careful in his examination, but he wasn't prepared for Klein's sudden encounter. As the reality of the situation dawned on him, his heart raced. The corpse's hand, which should have been lifeless, shot up with surprising strength, gripping Klein's wrist tightly. Klein recoiled in shock, struggling to free himself. The coldness of the dead man's grip sent shivers up his spine. Panic surged through him, memories of the gruesome scene flashing before his eyes. Fry, he shouted, desperately looking for help. But Fry was gone, leaving Klein alone with the corpse that had come back to life in a terrifying twist. Calm down, Klein murmured to himself, trying to suppress the growing fear that threatened to overwhelm him. He took a deep breath, focusing on the reality of the situation. This was no ordinary corpse. It was a beyonder, one that had faced death and still held a mysterious power. With a determined resolve, he steadied himself, even as the corpse's grip remained firm. What do you want? He asked, trying to sound braver than he felt. In response, the corpse's mouth opened slightly, revealing a raspy whisper. Help me. Find the truth. Klein's heart raced again, but this time with curiosity. The truth about what? He pressed, intrigued despite the fear coursing through him. The clown. The curse. The corpse struggled to articulate, its eyes suddenly flickering with life, an unsettling glow emanating from them. They took something from me. Who took it? Klein asked, heart pounding. Those who wear masks, it replied, its voice gaining strength with each word. The ones who hide in shadows. Klein's mind raced as he tried to piece together the cryptic message. The circus, he ventured, recalling the earlier conversation with Ayur and Larada. Yes, the circus. The corpse repeated, its grip loosening slightly as it began to fade back into a lifeless state. You must stop them, before it's too late. Klein's resolve strengthened. I will. But first, you need to let go of me. With a final exertion, the corpse released its grip, and Klein stumbled back, breathing heavily. He stared at the corpse, bewildered and shaken by the encounter. Just then, Fry returned, his expression unchanged. What happened? He asked, glancing between Klein and the corpse. It spoke to me, Klein managed, still processing the bizarre encounter. Fry's brows furrowed slightly, and he approached the corpse, examining it with newfound caution. It shouldn't have been able to do that, he murmured, perplexed. Do you think it's connected to the circus? Klein inquired, adrenaline still pumping through his veins. Perhaps, Fry replied, his voice steady. We need to report this to the captain. Klein nodded, and together they stepped out of the room, the weight of the clown's final words lingering in their minds. The mystery deepened, and Klein felt an unsettling sense of urgency. He knew they were on the brink of uncovering something far more sinister than they had imagined. Chapter 79. Another Murmuring. Klein felt his hair stand on end faster than when you realize someone's texting you back after you sent a risky message. The icy hand tightened around his wrist like a ghost hand from a bad Tinder date. He yanked his wrist back, using every bit of strength he had, like someone trying to pull a stop replying text back into the draft. Bam! The pale, naked corpse was pulled so hard it fell off the autopsy table like someone failing at a trust fall. But the dead man's ice-cold fingers still had the audacity to hold onto Klein's wrist like that one overly clingy ex who just doesn't let go. Klein's brain momentarily glitched out. His only thought? Grab the gun and blast this dead guy back to where he came from. With his dominant hand stuck in a death grip, he flung his cane like he was auditioning for a circus, desperately trying to get his revolver out. No luck. Suddenly, the corpse's eyes opened, revealing a pair of dead calm blue eyes like they were asking Klein, "Really, bro?" Its mouth moved. The corpse muttered, "Hornassus! Hornassus! Hornassus!" 3 creepy AF words, and Klein was more flustered than someone caught looking at their ex's Instagram at 3 a.m. The fingers finally loosened, dropping limp like someone who realized they had no business holding onto you in the first place. The suited clown's eyes closed again like nothing had happened. Klein blinked, wondering if he had been hallucinating. Maybe he shouldn't have had that second coffee this morning. He staggered backward, his body trembling like someone just scared the life out of him with a surprise jump scare. Phew! Phew! Klein gasped for air, trying to convince himself that he hadn't just been in a death grip with a naked corpse. He looked at the pale figure on the ground, feeling a mix of alarm, fear, and sus. Did that really just happen? He finally drew his revolver and backed away from the room like he was backing out of a bad deal. He took a glance at his wrist, the one holding his gun, and saw 5 deep, red finger marks. Yeah, this was definitely real. His wrist looked like it had been on the losing side of a brawl. Klein calmed down as his mind filled with one thought: fucking hell. He almost shh himself. Panting for several seconds, he gathered his wits, piecing together what had just happened, like someone trying to explain a crazy night out. He might not have understood why the suited clown suddenly decided to come back to life, but one thing was clear. The dude had repeated the word hornasis. It's hornasis again. Klein furrowed his brows like he was trying to figure out why the same shot keeps happening to him. The Antigonus family's notebook mentioned something about a nation of the Evernight in the Hornasis mountain range. And when I'm in spirit vision, I always hear stuff I really shouldn't, like Hornasis. What is the answer to all these creepy mysteries hiding in the mountains? Maybe there's some evil god sealed up there, waiting for a chance to break free. While considering this, Klein cautiously re-entered the room, poking at the corpse to make sure it was really dead this time. Nope, not taking any chances. He wasn't about to let Fry, the corpse collector, come back and find the place trashed. Klein mustered his courage and put the dead body back onto the autopsy table, feeling his nerves stretch tighter than jeans after Thanksgiving dinner. Every second of moving that corpse was nerve-wracking. His heart was in his throat, and the cold feeling from the body was just plain disgusting. Mission accomplished. Barely. Then Klein remembered why he was even here. He focused on the clown's wrist and looked at the strange brand. Only, it wasn't a brand anymore. It had slipped off, shrinking into a floating ball of blood with a tint of blue, like some kind of cursed cocktail ingredient. The blob of blood was the size of a thumb and just floated there, defying physics like it didn't give a damn. What the fuck is this? Klein muttered. But yeah, no way was he touching that. Nope. Klein wasn't hiding the floating blood blob. Firstly, he didn't know if it was good or bad news. And secondly, Fry, who had already examined the body earlier, probably knew what it was. And even if Fry didn't know, Klein figured it was way smarter to let the Nighthawks handle it than risk touching something that might explode in his face. Yeah, being part of a squad like this meant you had to know when to let someone else deal with the weird shot. Klein waited for what felt like hours, but finally, the black-haired, blue-eyed, and thin-lipped Fry returned. He spotted the floating blood blob immediately and asked Klein the same question that had been running through his own head. "What the hell is that?" "Beats me." Klein shrugged. He recounted the whole freaky experience without leaving out a single detail. "The brand slipped off into a blood sphere." Fry nodded, looking thoughtful. "Corpses of Beyonders always have weird-ass transformations." He looked back at Klein and said, "Go bring the captain here and tell him what the corpse muttered." On it. Klein was already more than happy to get the hell out of there. "You don't have to come back with him," Fry added with a casual wave. "Trust me, you don't want to see what comes next." The dude picked up a silver surgical knife, and Klein didn't stick around to find out what he planned to do with it. "I was hoping you'd say that." Klein nodded with lingering fear, grabbed his cane, popped on his hat, and got the hell out of Dodge, making his way to the Chanis Gate. There, he found Captain Dunn in the keeper's room. After listening to Klein's story, Dunn gave an almost imperceptible nod. "I'll report this to the higher-ups and let the Holy Cathedral deal with it. Maybe they'll send someone to check out the Hornasis mountain range." "I'll report this to the higher-ups and let the Holy Cathedral deal with it. Maybe they'll send someone to check out the Hornasis mountain range." Klein answered briefly in confirmation. Seeing that only Sleepless Kenley and the captain were in the keeper's room, he casually asked, "Are Mr. Iyer and the others resting?" Dunn nodded and said, "Iyer and Borgia are at St. Selena Cathedral. Lorata is probably looking for a coffee shop." "Coffee shop? Madame Lorata hasn't recovered from her injuries, right?" Klein asked in surprise. Dunn massaged his nose bridge and said with a laugh, "Lorata has 3 hobbies: coffee, dessert, and maidservants. She says she needs these 3 things to speed up her recovery." "Maidservants?" Klein asked, perplexed. Dunn shook his head helplessly and said, "She likes maidservants. Yeah, that's right. Furthermore, she likes ones with big breasts." "She sure is weird." Klein had no idea what kind of expression he should show in response. Dunn didn't delay any further as he headed out the keeper's room. As Klein watched his back, he silently waited for him to turn. Meanwhile, he noticed at the corner of his eye that Sleepless Kenley had fished out his pocket watch and opened it. 3, 2, 1. The moment Klein finished counting down silently, Dunn stopped and turned around. "Another thing I forgot. Klein, you went through a lot today. Once you relax, you'll feel exhausted. There's no need for you to be here in the afternoon. Go back and get some rest. Tomorrow I'll submit the application listing the detailed losses." "All right. Don't worry too much about your killing of a Beyonder. Killing him was equivalent to saving more lives. As a matter of fact, I'm actually feeling much better." Klein silently exhaled. Dunn nodded slightly, and just as he turned around, he smacked himself in the forehead. "I've also handed the Beyonder sketch to Leonard. He and the police department are in charge of the follow-up investigations. I believe that the Beyonder must have ridden on carriages, eaten food, and had somewhere to stay. Wherever he goes, whatever he touches, whatever he leaves behind, even unconsciously, will serve as a silent witness against him." Emperor Roselle's words are truly sensible. "Yes," Klein answered, stupefied. After the captain walked far away, he left the keeper's room and slowly walked to the second floor. Along the way, he suddenly recalled something as he experienced an additional bout of fear. That suited clown claimed that the secret order controlled the corresponding sequence pathway of seers. Even if he was exaggerating and they didn't have the higher sequence potion formulas, they definitely have the lower sequence ones. It also means that they have a number of seers. Then, wouldn't they divine that I killed the suited clown and secretly exact revenge against me? If they can't deal with the Nighthawks, can't they deal with me, a seer without any direct measures against enemies? Klein stopped in the stairwell and began thinking about the problem seriously. Soon, he discovered that he was worrying over nothing. Firstly, the secret order doesn't know who are members of the Nighthawks. Secondly, even if they know 1 or 2, They definitely wouldn't include a civilian staff member like me. Thirdly, under the present circumstances, unless they have a profit, there's no way they can divine who the murderer is. He heaved a sigh of relief and left the Blackthorn Security Company. He took a public carriage back to Daffodil Street. Even though he hadn't eaten lunch yet, he still lacked the appetite. After entering his bedroom, Klein removed his damaged suit first. Then he took off his half-top hat, got into bed, and tried to go to sleep. His mind remained active as though his entire existence couldn't relax. His mind wasn't repeating the scene of him shooting the suited clown to death, but of the scene of him moving the corpse, and that hair-raising experience. He no longer felt uncomfortable about killing for the first time, but more of a disgust when he thought about it. This was probably Fry's goal. He hoped that I would approach the corpse and face it directly to overcome my trauma. But even though the trauma from before is gone, I've been traumatized by something new. Klein gave a self-deprecating laugh as he gradually felt his nerves calm down. He had no idea when he dozed off, but when he woke up, his stomach was groaning in protest. I feel like I can eat an entire horse. Klein muttered as he looked at the sun setting in the west as though the sky was alit. Changing into old but comfortable casual clothes, he briskly walked to the first floor. Before he could consider what to make for dinner, he heard the door open. Melissa. The corners of his mouth curled up at the thought. Ever since she began taking the public carriage, his sister no longer returned home late. The key twisted as the door opened. Melissa walked in with her bag that contained her books and stationery. She looked at the kitchen and said, "Klein, there's a letter for you. It's from your mentor." "A letter from mentor?" "Right. I wrote to him asking about the relevant historical situation of the Hornassus main peak." Klein was taken aback at first before he recalled the matter. Chapter 80, Banquet Invitation. After stuffing his face with dinner, Klein, now fully embracing that post-meal laziness, sprawled across the living room sofa like a satisfied cat. With the finesse of a nobleman, he wielded a small letter opener to slice through the envelope from his mentor. At the dining table, Melissa was deep in her books, her head probably moments away from bursting with equations, all under the glow of the gas lamp. Benson was lounging nearby, pretending to be interested in accountancy for beginners while secretly wishing he was anywhere else. As Klein unfolded the letter, his heart did that thing, half excited, half terrified, as he began to read. "I'm happy to receive your letter. It brings back memories of the good old days. Sadly, Welch and Naya will never share those with us again. I attended their burials separately, and I could almost feel their parents' souls shattering. They were so young, and their future should have been as bright as your uncle's forehead at noon. Fate, that unpredictable buck, has her way with us. The older I get, the more I realize how fragile and helpless we really are. As for the Hornassus main peak, the archaeologist John Joseph, no relation to that guy who made everyone think he was called John Doe, published a paper on it. He found some ancient ruins up there, probably dating back over 1,000 years. What's embarrassing for historians and archaeologists is how bad we are at dating. Buildings, I mean, not people. Anyway, we can only guess based on the architecture, murals, and some texts we could decipher. It's hard to believe people would live up there, like they were setting up a humans versus nature challenge. But Joseph found evidence that these ancient mountain folks had a civilization. If you're curious about the details, try borrowing the book Research of the Hornassus Main Peak's Relics from Deweyville Library. Trust me, Deweyville's donation stash is bigger than your ego after a winning streak. There are also papers on the subject published in New Archaeology and Archaeology Summary. Real page-turners, I swear. Klein took his time reading, mentally noting the titles like he was about to ace a pop quiz. Then, like a proper gentleman, he grabbed some paper, an envelope, and a fountain pen to write his thank you letter. "Melissa, can you send this out for me? Here's some cash for the stamps." Klein placed the sealed envelope and a suspiciously large amount of money on Melissa's desk. She barely glanced at it before curling her lips. "Klein, stamps aren't that expensive unless you're sending them with a gold brick." Klein grinned like he'd planned this. "True, but a lady like you could use some extra cash for an allowance, right? I'm sure Selena's already hinted at it." Melissa was ready to argue. but Klein hit her with a quick, "You can use it for those materials and tools you've been eyeing." "Tools," she mumbled, lost in thought. Then, with a barely there nod, she muttered, "All right." Klein, victorious, strutted back to the sofa, his grin wider than the Grand Canyon. "Well played. You really nailed that weak spot," Benson said, giving Klein a thumbs up while trying not to laugh. Klein, suddenly full of faux seriousness, cleared his throat. "And how exactly do I convince you?" "Maybe get you to focus on language and literature. Gotta keep those brain cells working, along with some basic math and logic." Benson looked like someone had just asked him to solve world hunger. "I feel like a curly-haired baboon in front of those books." Klein, with a firm nod, said, "But they're useful." At that moment, Melissa stepped up to the sofa. "Benson, Klein, this Sunday is Selena's birthday, and she and her parents are throwing a banquet. Are you guys free?" Klein mulled it over and said, "Yeah, I'm down." Meanwhile, he thought it'd be a good idea to get to know Melissa's friends, just in case. Benson, running his fingers through his hair like some heartthrob, said, "Me too. Guess we'll have to think of a birthday present for Miss Selena." Klein chuckled. "Leave it to Melissa. She knows what Selena likes. Our job is to be gentlemen and, of course, pay for it." Benson shook his head, chuckling. "That's the nicest way I've heard laziness described." Klein smirked. "That's the magic of language and ancient literature." The next day, Klein put on his cheap formal suit, because, budget, and grabbed his silver-inlaid cane like he was about to host a ball, not head to work. His tuxedo was already at the tailor's, which means someone was going to look extra fancy soon. As he reached Blackthorn Security's door, he spotted Captain Dunn coming out. "Good morning, Klein. Sleep well?" Klein answered, "Better than I thought. No nightmares, but recalling everything still feels gross." "That's good," Dunn said, clearly relieved. Then, like it was casual chat, he added, "By the way, the Holy Cathedral replied to my telegram. Antigonus and Lorada are taking the sealed artifact and notebook back to Backland. They've even sent another Nighthawk to help." Klein blinked in surprise. "Wait, am I actually free from that nightmare? Is this real life?" "May the goddess bless them," he said, performing the crimson moon sign. Dunn put on his hat and casually mentioned, "We've also found their carriage driver and confirmed their hideout, but as expected of an ancient secret organization, they left behind 0 clues." Klein nodded. "Yep, no surprises there." As Dunn walked off, Roseanne, our perpetually exhausted civilian staff member, popped up with wide eyes. "Goddess! Klein, you're becoming a formal member? Already? You're breaking records." Klein smiled. "It was bound to happen once I drank the seer potion." Roseanne sighed dramatically. "I was hoping you'd finish your mysticism lesson so you could help with the armory duty. Goddess knows I'm not cut out for it. I mean, look at my skin. Look at my sanity." Klein raised an eyebrow. "Weren't you used to this before I came? You, Brett, and old Neil took turns, right?" Roseanne shook her head like life had betrayed her. "There were 4 of us before. Then Kenley became a sleepless, and Viola left to work for a machinery company. Now I'm stuck pulling double duty." Then, with a mischievous grin, she said, "Hey, Klein, I've got a brilliant idea. Get married, spill the beans about being a beyonder, and boom, your wife can join us as civilian staff." Klein's face twitched. "Roseanne, you could do the same, Find a husband and drop some secrets. I bet you'd be pretty good at it." Roseanne's eyes widened in shock. "What? Marriage is serious business. I can't just rush it." Klein smiled but decided not to argue further. After some small talk, he headed down to the armory. Old Neil, as always, was wrestling with his coffee machine. Klein sat down to wait. "Almost an official member, huh?" Old Neil asked. Klein shrugged. "Captain said it'll take 2 or 3 more days. I'm just waiting on the Holy Cathedral." Neil chuckled. "They won't deny it, trust me. But you better be ready for that initiation mission. Don't worry, Captain Dunn will give you something easy. You're a seer, after all. Support types always get the simple stuff. Besides, you're a support type seer." After Klein finished chatting with old Neil, he returned home. After having dinner, a satiated Klein casually lounged on the living room sofa. He used a small letter opener to open the letter he received from his mentor. Melissa was sitting by the dining table at the time, working hard on a textbook problem with the gas lamp for illumination. Benson was cradled in a single-seater, reading Accountancy for Beginners. Klein found 3 pages in the letter that he read with both fear and anticipation. Very happy to receive your letter. It reminds me of the good old days over the past few years. Unfortunately, Welch and Naya have left us forever. I attended their burials separately and could feel their parents' anguish. The two of them were young adults who were supposed to have beautiful, bright futures ahead of them. Fate is always so unpredictable. No one can know what will happen to you next. I've experienced more as I've grown older, and I can increasingly sense the weakness and helplessness of humanity. Regarding the historical information revolving around the Hornachus main peak, I recall that the archaeologist, Mr. John Joseph, once published a monograph detailing it. It includes his accounts of his time at the Hornachus main peak. He discovered a few ancient buildings that are more than 1,000 years old. What shames every historian and archaeologist is our inability to precisely date the era. We can only make a crude estimate based on the architecture style, the characteristics of the murals, and a few of the texts that we can decipher. It's quite unbelievable that such a tall mountain peak would have humans living there. Mr. Joseph has ample evidence to prove that those humans developed a civilization that they can call their own. As for the details, it is hard to fully describe them in this letter. I suggest you try borrowing this monograph from the Deweyville Library. Trust me, Sir Deweyville's donation to this library makes it have more books in its collection than the one built by the city government. The monograph's title is Research of the Hornachus Main Peak's Relics. It is published by the Lowen Publishing Firm. In addition, there are some papers that discuss something of relevance. They are published in the journals, New Archaeology, Archaeology Summary. The exact issue and journal volume is... Klein read every word and repeated the names of the monograph and paper names silently. Immediately afterward, he found some paper and an envelope, as well as a fountain pen, before penning his gratitude. Melissa, help me send this letter out. This is the money for the stamps. Klein placed the sealed envelope and more than enough money for the stamps on his sister's desk. Melissa took a glance and curled her lips. Klein, stamps don't cost that much. Yes, stamps don't, but a girl should have some allowance. Klein replied with a smile. I believe Selena has mentioned this to you before. Noticing that Melissa was about to protest, he quickly added, it can be used to buy the materials and tools you need. Tools? Melissa repeated softly again and again before casting her gaze back onto her books. All right, she said as she nodded imperceptibly. The corners of Klein's mouth immediately curved upwards as he briskly walked back to the sofa. Excellent persuasion skills. You precisely pinpointed Melissa's weakness. Benson gave a thumbs up as he said with a suppressed laugh. Klein cleared his throat and said in all seriousness, Then how shall I persuade you? Your self-study should emphasize language and ancient literature. Of course, basic mathematics and logic are equally important. According to the curriculum of the public schools and grammar schools, as well as the material tested for in college admissions, Klein was very confident about the general direction in which the upcoming civil servant examinations would focus on. Benson touched his hairline and said with a self-deprecating smile, I feel like a curly-haired baboon in front of those books. But they're really useful, Klein said with the determined smile. At that moment, Melissa put down her fountain pen, stood up, and walked to the sofa. Benson, Klein, this Sunday is Selena's birthday. She and her parents wish to invite all of us to their place for a banquet. Are both of you free? Should be fine for me, Klein said after some thought. He could take the opportunity to be acquainted with his sister's friends. It could prevent him from being utterly clueless whenever something happened to her. Me too, Benson said as he combed his hair with his fingers. It looks like we'll have to think of a birthday present for Miss Selena. Klein smiled. This should be left to Melissa. She knows Miss Selena better than us. Besides, what we need to do is what a gentleman ought to do. Pay for it. This is the first time I've heard someone describe laziness in such a pleasant manner, Benson said as he shook his head and chuckled. Klein returned with a smile. This is the purpose of language and ancient literature. Benson never expected Klein to return to the subject at hand. It left him momentarily speechless.